Welcome back to our technical update series here with Axel Pearson and Michael Myer, both of them with PNNL. Axel just joined PNNL in 2022 as an energy efficiency project manager supporting the energy efficiency technologies team with a focus on energy efficient lighting and controls. Prior to PNNL, Axel worked for the Design Lights Consortium, leading their solid state lighting program and developing DLC's technical requirements. Axel also has experience with codes and standards development, lighting auditing, utility incentive programs, and energy education. He has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from the University of Colorado and a master's degree in environmental management from the University of San Francisco and is lighting certified by the NCQLP. Michael Myer is a cat wrangler, that's what it says here, a father, a husband, and has worked at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory for 15 years. Michael's journey in lighting started with theater, and then Michael attended Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. After RPI, Michael worked and learned architectural lighting from Hayden McKay and then Naomi Miller. Michael's portfolio at PNNL is board, and he supports building energy codes, appliance standards, and market transformation. Before we go, though, Greg Eric, I think we got to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Cooper Lighting. That's right. Go to COOPERLIGHTING.com, Greg Eric.
That's right. And the topic we're going to talk about is lighting system integration today. Cooper Lighting Solution provides highly integrated lighting automation solutions that incorporate traditional relay panels, room-based controllers, smart and connected devices, and innovative advanced software applications that can control indoor and outdoor spaces while reducing energy costs, improving occupancy comfort, and much more. You got to visit cooperlighting.com to learn all about it.
Thanks to Cooper Lighting. I find this topic particularly exciting. So, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you to start these guys off, maybe hit them with some technical questions, and I'll just sit back and enjoy.
Just like that, huh? I like it. So we know all about, or we don't know all about, but we've talked a lot about lighting controls. And we know what the purpose of lighting controls is, to save energy for the most part. I know there are other advantages and benefits to it as well. But you guys are saying that you can save even more by integrating HVAC security and plug load. How so? How can you save more?
Would you like to start, Axel?
Sure. Yeah. To me, it's about the fact that the lighting systems can communicate and interact with those other building systems that enhances the building's performance. Lighting sensors have some valuable real estate up in the building ceiling, right? They got a bird's eye view that can see and sense a lot of things beyond just occupancy. They can collect all sorts of other information. So when those other building systems talk with the lighting occupancy sensors or other daylight sensors or other sensors that might be integrated into the lighting fixture or lighting sensors, they can really, again, enhance that building performance. They can relay that valuable information back to these other systems. An easy example is using the lighting occupancy sensors to set back the HVAC temperature set points. If it knows the space is unoccupied, doesn't have to cool as much. It could bump up the temperature a few degrees. When it senses occupancy, the HVAC system goes back to normal occupied setting, temperature drops, the AC kicks on a little bit more. Same with plug loads. If you've got some controllable plug load that with, of course, non-critical systems plugged into it, maybe a task light or a cell phone charger, can click off when the space is not occupied.
Michael, you want to expand?
We recently completed a project with the U.S. Department of Defense, Tinker Air Force Base. There, the lighting system was in both an industrial high bay space as well as about 5,000 square feet of office. And exactly as Axel said, when the granular sensors didn't detect any occupancy, there was a drift in the temperature for some setback, as well as some fans. Saved about 38% of the energy from the mechanical system. Now, the nice thing there is That's energy and savings sitting on the ground. It's, that old analogy of low-hanging fruit. That fruit's fallen off the ground. It's easy to pick up. It's operational savings. It doesn't actually involve any real new equipment, so it's really nice. And then the plug load savings were about 25 to 30% as well. Plug load savings can be a little more dicey. Sometimes by just using a simple scheduled approach, you can save the same or even more than the occupancy-based approach. But yeah, you're already putting in a pretty smart system, and why only do something with a lighting signal? Take it and connect other building systems with it.
So I think the idea and the concept is there, but the compatibility always seems to be the concern. Is how is your lighting control system going to talk to your HVAC and all these other devices? How do you tackle that?
It's a struggle. I think you're right there, and it's definitely where we are as an industry working better towards. The first thing is that BACnet is not the only mechanical protocol out there, but it is a very common one, and a lot of BACnet equipment requires it to be tested. So you know that when something communicates via BACnet, you're at least starting off there. And a lot of the lighting systems can communicate BACnet. The challenge is there's different versions of BACnet, and recently I was on a project where it said BACnet, but it was, I think, BACnet version 2, and we're like, well, we're at BACnet 14. Why? So just because they claim it's BACnet doesn't mean that it's perfectly universal. I would say the integration is still the struggle. You are now trying to get two different trades, the mechanical trade and the electrical trade, to communicate. Who's actually doing the zoning? And thermal mechanical zoning is much different than lighting zoning, as we know. And so you do need to have someone to actually do that integration. I'm a big fan of the integrator, but there are buildings with a good mechanical staff, either direct contractors or people on site who have done it. We've got about 6 to 10 projects now, various levels of success. Some, the integration really was a struggle for many reasons. Others, that was kind of super easy and really just rocking and rolling with great savings.
Axel, before I make a comment here, do you want to expound further on what Michael just said there?
Well, the one thing I want to hit, and I don't know if we're going to get into this later, but is another benefit beyond the energy savings of integrated systems. It also kind of enables a lot of these non-energy benefits. And that's part of the program that I run called the Integrated Lighting Campaign. We really look for some of those other non-energy benefits, like, integrated with the security system or an IoT kind of infrastructure that a site may have, or asset tracking, that type of thing. And we might get into specific projects a little bit later, but so, you know, the integration enables those good energy savings, but it's often those non-energy benefits that could tip the scale and provide that higher value prop in favor of these integrated systems.
Okay, so before I ask my question, because you just opened up with like 10 more with there, let's start listing out the non-energy benefits. Let's let's kind of summarize those. What are they, Axel? And then maybe Michael, maybe you can follow up if you think he's missed anything.
Yeah, so I listed like security.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's kind of an easy one. If you have an occupancy-based security system, if it senses motion after hours when the building is closed, that could trigger a security alert.
Mm-hmm.
The other one I mentioned was, an IoT infrastructure. So using lighting sensors or lighting fixtures as access points for, the internet. We had a project recognized through the Integrated Lighting Campaign last year that was kind of a shipping facility. So it was an outdoor exterior installation. They really expanded their internet network by putting Wi-Fi kind of on each exterior lighting system, and it really helped them kind of integrate and facilitate their operations a lot better. And then asset tracking was another one I mentioned. So we also recognized last year's Integrated Lighting Campaign year, who used their lighting system to track movement around their stores and see where their customers were headed in the right direction, and to see where they can best put product and stuff like that.
Michael, you have anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, we've seen this evaluated by the U.S. General Services Administration. These are the
Hmm.
organization within the federal government that operates the buildings. One of the things they're exploring it for was possibly geofencing. So the idea is that you may have a
Hmm.
sensitive area on an open floor, and their ID badges could tell you whether or not they went into an area. We also know a manufacturer who did that at their own headquarters. Also, now in the wake of the pandemic, you could also use contact tracing. Now you actually have an idea if people are close to each other without having to use other metrics. Again, if their ID badge has a tag. Again, the GSA, which is the General Service Administration, they used it to actually determine motion traffic, to determine, well, if in their hoteling model where people don't have an assigned desk and they just show up and they take a space, how can they actually, where do people want to work? How can they possibly reduce their real estate footprint? And then also where people are moving about the store, or not the store, about the floor, so they could actually tell people maybe this is where we need to put important information because this is a high traffic area and those type of things. From a real estate optimization point of view, not only is the federal government, but also a lot of commercial real estate are trying to figure out what can they do in the wake of all these changes, and they need more data.
Okay. So we put out a pilot series in the last couple months on just dedicated with lighting controls, and it's a controls educator with someone who's a field controls integrator. And that show is now moving to become a full-time show with Get a Grip on Lighting and Nailed. We're going to be launching it in September. It's called the Lighting Controls Podcast. And what's interesting is that Ron Kuzmar, who's one of the hosts, is a lighting controls integrator. That's his job. And I've never heard of that before. Like that, all he does is commission and configure remotely. He sets up like a remote control on their system and then configures and adjusts their settings on their controls from his desk and wherever he lives or wherever he works. And what's interesting is that there's this emerging field that we don't have. There's no association for these people. There's no guild or trade association for this controls integrator technician technical job. And I feel like there's a massive opportunity for people like in college, if you're listening to this or you're studying engineering or something. This controls integration piece, I think, is the fundamental thing. Axel, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny that we being PNNL also work on behalf of the Better Buildings workforce program. And so that provides some training and education around new upcoming green careers. And the integrator is totally one that we've talked about because it's not really out there. There's no certifications on it. You can't go get an LC in lighting integration. And I can't say that there's no, college programs, but I haven't found any. I've been doing a little research, but I totally agree. And these are really key positions that need to grow because if we have this great technology and it just doesn't work in the field, it's not going to do us any good. And we need skilled people out there to do that integration and do that work and make sure it works right.
And I'm going to throw it over to Michael here. Often this is put on electricians, and I have electricians that work for me. I don't want them commissioning lighting controls, because while people think, yeah, that's what the electrician does, he may have no idea how that actually works, Michael.
Electricians have to know such a wide variety of things from any aspect of the National Electrical Code. Lighting may not be their only sole focus. So yes, I think it's helpful to have people who specialize in all the, and then I think going back to one of the earlier comments and questions is the specific vendors. So it is one thing to just know how the protocols work, but then even some of the vendors tweak it a little bit. So I do think that specialization is important. I do think there are some electricians who are out there who can do it, but there are also many electricians who, as I said, they're broad skilled and they may be focusing on just the larger wiring and all the other things that are not lighting that are electrical in a building. And so this is a skill set where they may not want to focus. And I think it's great that there are people out there who can step up and think about how all the different systems connect to each other and how that is their kind of focus. Also, at the end of the day, at the end of the project, when the integration really needs to happen, the contractor is probably already busy and maybe starting to move on to their next job. And so it is kind of a good secondary job for someone who's not the contractor to do. I think it makes sense.
Greg, I look at this play and, listen, I'm going to tell you right now, everybody kind of feels the ebbing of the LED lighting boom. It's kind of over now. And, there's massive adoption rates in certain markets. Greg, do you think this is something that, what we call frontline lighting practitioners, contractors, agents, and distributors, should they be thinking about hiring a controls integrator, Greg, bringing someone on board that can help with this sort of stuff? What are your thoughts? And then you take over on the podcast here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you asked me that, because my question was related to that. Because when I think about this and I hear about it, I'm like, okay, a lot of the projects have gone LED to LED. Great savings, made total sense. The payback is there, right? All right, now let's talk about controlling it. So what do we got to do to control it? We got to buy the controls. Then we got to install the controls. And then now we have to have a specialist come and make sure that they get it installed right and commissioned. And, that's where these non-energy benefits need to be defined for it to make sense to us. So we need to be able to go to someone and say, hey, I'm able to do this for you, or potentially do this. That's a problem I have with the non-energy is it's always I can potentially do this. I can never say I'm going to save you this, and that's where it gets harder. How are we going to tackle that? How are we going to get to the point where people that are working with the end users can go out and safely say that? It's open to either of you guys if you have the answer.
Yeah, I wish we all always had the answer. That's a hard question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of places. If you think about how long it took for LEDs for the uptake, we as an industry did a lot of saving analysis and showing, yes, the savings were consistent in there. So I think that's the first thing that's going to happen is we need some more pilot projects out there, some more, multiple retailers who are willing to not only pilot it, but also then share it. So that everyone can understand this is what it is. I think one of the challenge when we look at non-energy aspects is that some of the value there is unique and within the eye of the beholder. Not everyone considers that because it's not as intrinsic as, let's say, KWH. We all know how to monetize that really quickly, but it's much different when I say, well, the value of geofencing to this organization is this. It may not be the same value to someone else. So having a means and a methodology, so at least someone could supply their own numbers, so they at least could say, okay, our organization thinks, space management is $2 a square foot. Okay, but someone else's organization may think it's only 50 cents. So I think there's two things. One is we need some proven out examples, and then a standardized approach, so that way we're not relying on, well, I think I can save. It's like, here's the process in which we think the value could be proven. Sure. And then let you supply your own numbers, because also nationally, as much like we know lighting prices vary across the country, all costs vary across the country. So the cost of real estate is very different in California compared to Iowa. So just because it was valuable in California, it may not have the same monetary value in Iowa. And so we need to have methodology to allow for scaling both by industry as well as location.
And Axel, maybe this was good. Or go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to continue on that. I think, and this is really what Michael and I have been working on, is those pilot projects or examples where we're finding successful installations. And again, the integrated lighting campaign does just that. This year we recognized 16 installations, not all integration. We also recognize just exemplary advanced controls. But really we are building a body of knowledge, and it may not be quantitative. We may not help you meet cost effectiveness criteria for projects, but a lot of these case studies that we develop or projects that we recognize in the integrated lighting campaign really show, different stories. Someone might be able to find, a building owner might be able to find their building or a building type that's similar to theirs and say, wow, they did that, we can do this. Similarly with Michael's field evaluations, he's been looking at a ton of different spaces and has been a bit more rigorous and quantitative with it. In fact, we just wrote an ACEEE paper together that will be presented on next week at the ACEEE Summer Study. It was covering the field evaluations and recognized participants, looking at lessons learned, best practices, benefits, and opportunities, just listing out from these, there's at least 20 examples of various installations of advanced lighting controls, integrated plug load, integrated HVAC, and other systems, non-energy benefits. So again, that kind of building that body of knowledge, I think, is a pretty key part, and that's what we've been working on.
Try
to get out there.
when you said 38% on HVAC, I've never seen a number like that with HVAC. Like without, but even some of the heat pumps and stuff like that, when you're taking out natural gas and you're going heat pump, you're basically switching from gas to electricity. You know what I'm saying? And so, you're not going to be buying gas anymore, but I have a heat pump in my home. It costs a lot of electricity to run that heat pump. Okay. I don't care what anyone says. It's a DX refrigerant based loop in my ground and everything, but it runs on a lot of electricity. I've never seen 38% before for HVAC. That is a big number. And the thing that's interesting to me is I'm not sure that this is a lighting distributor play, Greg. I think we're going to see the emergence of new kinds of companies that simply, maybe they come from lighting, maybe they come from security, maybe they come from HVAC, but they merge into this integrator field, and they specialize in that with, building, like the guy that does the integrator on the Lighting Controls podcast. That's coming up, folks. It's not out yet, late September, but he actually writes software, middleware software for this two softwares to speak together and stuff like that. And that's a really highly skilled knowledge worker, actually, that can do that. And I think we're going to see an emergence of a new profession rather than lighting distributors tacking it on to selling, a lighting project. So before I ask my next question, I know you guys want to talk. You guys are PNNL, right? So there's a lot of smart people working at PNNL. And I'm not saying the people that work for nail distributors or anything like that. They're just not at that level of knowledge, and along with being paid to spend the time to figure these things out, it needs to be simple, like Greg says. How do you feel about new buildings versus existing buildings? It's almost like I think this is an absolute no-brainer for if you're putting a shovel in the ground. I have a hard time thinking about existing buildings. Have you guys looked at that much? Is there different business cases with a new build versus an existing building?
Yeah. I think it's a great question that you're asking about new buildings versus retrofit. We definitely look at retrofit more, mainly because new buildings tend to fall under more current energy codes, as well as there's just a larger stock of buildings that exist. So retrofit market is always a question we're looking at. I want to pause and go back to your earlier comment. I completely agree. I do worry that it's going to come from outside the lighting industry. And one of the thoughts I have is that mechanical contractors have almost a lifelong relationship with the building, whereas electrical contractors don't have the same relationship. So it's very common if you have a BAS that your mechanical contractor comes routinely, yearly, whatever, to modify or do things like that. We don't have that same relationship in the lighting industry and electrical industry, where once the system's up and running, that electrician may not come back and service that building again, or it may do one-off things depending on it. But I do worry that we need to think about how can we develop longer standing relationships, or the other trades are going to step in, like you suggested. But back to your question about retrofits and the 38%, some of the challenges that we're learning is that, one, our buildings aren't as optimized as we think, or retro commissioned. So the challenge is we designed the building and we commissioned it 10, 15 years ago. Its operating profile may have changed. A healthcare chain that's mostly on the insurance side, I was recently at a meeting with, and they just kind of admitted they didn't know it, but they were operating most of their mechanical systems 24 hours a day, even though the buildings weren't operating that way. And just by actually doing some scrutiny. And so I'm going to blow your mind. We did actually a project at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Now, this is a road facility, and that it exists for where they're going to send out trucks if they need to salt the roads, that type of stuff. So its operational profile is very abnormal, and they don't know when they're going to be busy. And so they operated that building in a 24-hour manner. Through the integration, we actually saved over 70% on the mechanical system. But again, most of that just had occurred had they thought about it and said, hey, can we operate this in a better manner? They could have saved some of those savings as well. But it was because of the scrutiny and because of the variable occupancy, we were able to save a significant energy through that integration. So, but I think the key thing is, are our buildings operating the way we think they are? And that's a great story for the retrofits. Like, go back and look what you're doing. Certain energy codes in certain jurisdictions are now moving to a 5-year retro commission of mechanical systems, just because we know things get out of whack. And so there's some great savings just by truing up our buildings.
Axel.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think one point to be made is that the opposite can also be true. If there's a building with very predictable occupancy and use patterns, maybe these really advanced controls or integration will be less cost effective because they can achieve the same type of savings with a timer. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that super advanced controls or a fully integrated building, especially in a retrofit scenario where it's could be very expensive to retrofit the building, it may not always be the sole solution. And I think there's a lot of existing buildings out there that there are very little controls. We know that I think it's less than 2% of buildings right now have advanced lighting controls, and it's usually just on-off switch. And so many existing buildings, retrofits can benefit from just some basic controls, or like Michael said, some scrutiny on their existing control uh, strategies, and anything would be an improvement there.
Most buildings, commercial buildings, if you're talking about commercial buildings, I would say they do have control systems that are overridden because they're too complicated and nobody knows how to use them.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you there. It's like a lot of this stuff with controls is kind of counterintuitive. So back in 2007 or 8, I made a deep dive into parking garage occupancy sensors and tried to sell a lot of that. And we found all sorts of different ways to figure out how much a lot of people have the fob data that you can print out so you can see the entries and exits into the garage by foot and by car. In and out, you can see it. And so I looked at it, and it was counterintuitive because the people that were most interested in doing lighting controls in their parking garage had the largest parking garages, but the more spots in the parking garage, the more likely the lights were to be on. So if you had the smaller the parking garage, if it had less than 50 spots, it would for sure make sense to do aux sensors in that garage. If it had more than 150 spots per level, there was no chance that garage would be a good garage for doing an occupancy control system on the lighting system because they wouldn't get enough savings because the lights would be turning on all the time in the space. And so a lot of this stuff involves building studying the use of how people use these buildings. Is there an easy way to do that? Because if lighting distributors could come up with a business case saying, "Hey, I once put a data logger occupancy sensor in the president of the company's office," okay, and we got to the point in the presentation when he said, "Hey, how come everybody's leaving their lights on? We need to do a company policy that you shut off your lights." I said, first of all, you spend thousands and thousands of dollars every year automating your manufacturing. Why don't you automate your lighting? And second of all, here's the profile of your office. You leave your lights on all the time too, actually. So, this type of thing. Is there an easier way to do it which reflects all the different areas of the non-energy benefits you talked about? Is there any kind of data logger system? Is there some way to really analyze these buildings as a third party for the customer?
Well, like you said, that there's this new profession that is emerging as the controls integrator. There's, I think, also retro commissioning professionals that can go out and look and do that scrutiny that Michael was talking about, and be that third party and say, all right, let's talk about your current occupancy patterns, your current use of the buildings, and all your control settings, and see what we can do, because there is some savings to be had just by that retro commissioning process.
Whew. All right.
I would also, well, it's a bit of a catch-22. I think the way partially to do it is with granular occupancy sensors, so that you can actually aggregate the data and look at it. But then if you don't have the occupancy sensors in place, you can't do that analysis. So if someone's not going to give you, like you say, fob data or some other means of tracking it, it is a struggle. We have seen that, at least in the studies I've looked at, people are notoriously bad at overestimating their occupancy. They think people are in the building more often than they are. Mm-hmm. And also now in a post-pandemic work scenario, I think the whole thing gets thrown out the window. What are people's working policies? Are they a 2-day a week in an office? How flexible is it? And so that's where at least having the data from the lighting system of saying, okay, we were detecting this much occupancy. So we did, again, at this GSA facility, it was a 20,000 square foot floor plate. So we had 500 sensors. So we could actually get in and do some really good granular data, but not everyone can afford that. But I think the key thing there is to start showing what you can do with the data and suggest how to do some of the analysis. but the problem is you have to solve the system. So again, we're still in this catch-22 of how to, you can't do the analysis until you have the data. I apologize.
Well, I was going to say, I know, Greg, you were pointing at yourself there, but I have to jump in here right now and just say, is the data more valuable than the energy savings? Like, like think of every other business that we've seen massive growth in the last 20 years. If you have a cell phone, you're not even the customer now. People that want your data are really the customers, and you're like the product. And you may pay that cell phone bill, but if you're a user of Google, you're the product. Facebook, Twitter, the customer is the person paying for the data that they get. Is there a data play here where maybe you give away the sensors for free and you get the data and somebody gets to use the data? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, it seems like any type you see this massive adoption is because there's some information that they want to take that's in aggregate is more valuable than, providing people, they give you a free cell phone or whatever, and the equipment's free. Has anyone thought of it from that perspective? Can the data be that valuable?
I think utilities are interested in that, especially when it comes to demand response and that type of thing. If they can, on aggregate, look at how buildings are occupied at different times, and they can maybe predict when energy is going to be used, they can manage the grid a little bit better. That's one thought.
Greg, over to you.
I think,
Michael. Yep.
Oh, I do think there are some probably in the building science that are looking at the data. I think of some mechanical vendors who may be using some of the data that's more, that, as you say, that they're getting more information and value out of the data than the savings. That is not entirely the space I work in, but I do hope someone is thinking about how they can do something with that data, because that would be a game changer.
Now, we've had this discussion here for a little while, and I think and I hope it's all leading towards the purpose of what you guys are doing, the integrated lighting campaign. Can you explain what that is exactly? I know you've hinted at it and talked about it, but who's leading it? What's it about? What's the goal? What's the time frame? Give me the ins and outs.
Yeah, for sure. So I lead the integrated lighting campaign. It's part of DOE's Better Buildings initiative. Really, what it does is it recognizes these cool, innovative, integrated, and advanced lighting control installations. And again, those are those installations of lighting where it can kind of talk with and communicate with those other building systems. And so what it is, it's a recognition program. It's not really a competition, but to be recognized, building owners and managers just submit an application to us, and we review, meaning PNNL and DOE, along with our organizing committee, and that's kind of like the steering committee of the campaign. We sort through it, discuss, debate, and we decide which installations and submissions are exemplary. And so we just recognize, again, these exemplary installations, whether it's advanced lighting controls or if they're integrated with HVAC or plug loads or something else. We have a new category on horticultural lighting and integration. And then we also recognize supporters of the campaign, and that's often utilities or energy efficiency organizations. And we have a new category this year also that is diversity, equity, and inclusion champions. So we're trying to recognize those in the lighting industry that are really advancing those DEI goals.
So campaigns are
go ahead, Mike.
Campaigns are a market transformation mechanism. So earlier, other versions of them have been, as the reference to parking. So in around 2014, there was a LED in parking lot lighting that tried to move that market early. There's been other ones related to building envelope, as well as energy management information systems. The idea is, I always kind of try to joke as it's positive peer pressure. So you're trying to see what your peers are out there doing. You're also learning. It really is for cutting edge and new technologies. So you're trying to get some of those field stories out there early. What are their successes? Oh, it is possible. This isn't just one outlying person. Major organizations and small organizations. In previous campaigns, you had Walmart as well as a church simultaneously be recognized because the technologies were accessible both at a large scale and a little scale.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Having the recognition, and maybe that's what you meant there, is that what's going to eventually drive it. I get that. Some people are going to do it and get recognized, but how is it going to make people want to do it?
Yeah, I call
see
that,
others.
Greg, I call that things usually start like this by giving away free Gucci suits, right? So, it's like, yeah, you get to wrap yourself in these accolades as a part of your reward for being an early adopter, right? And so, what early adopters are looking for is not necessarily to be the cheapest building, to have the lowest operating costs. What an early adopter is looking for is really status among competition. And so they want to attract those higher end clients that are, going to look at that and say, yeah, we received this, Axel, we received this award from PNNL for energy integrating excellence. And our lighting control system works like this. And so they're actually making their brand more valuable in doing this. And the free Gucci suits that if you can give them out, they help those early adopters justify the hurdles and get through some of the education time and that sort of stuff. And so I think PNNL is doing a great job in the DOE by doing that, because that's where we learn. We learn through those early adopters that pay the price for the Gucci suit. You know what I mean? And it's very important. We need to acknowledge them. Otherwise, why would they do it? You know what I'm saying? I think that's a really good part of your program, that you're recognizing people like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Gucci suit is the kind of Better Buildings stamp of approval, really. It is a recognition logo that they can use, and it adds credibility to their project. So it's good not only for the building owner or the building manager, but partners that install the lighting systems. They get to say, I worked on this integrated lighting campaign recognized building.
I don't know if you said it before, or go ahead, Michael. Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, really, it's not important, but since we're talking about Gucci suits, I'm a 38 long, if anyone's asking, needs to know.
Nice.
Good. Slip it in there.
Any of the recognized buildings, were they all new construction or were they existing? Any of them?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
An example of a new building, we recognize Denver Water's, just their administration building, and it's a new construction lead platinum, I believe, and they really built a heck of a building and integrated with HVAC. Of course, that was right around pandemic time, and they don't think they have actual measured savings yet from post-COVID occupancy. But then there was also I mentioned one that was Massport is their kind of is a Massachusetts shipping facility that just retrofitted their exterior lighting. So it really kind of runs the gamut. We've had horticulture installations this year. We are announcing the recognized winners at this year's IES annual conference that's just coming up later this week, and Michael will be there to make the announcement. So I won't share with you the actual names of our recognized participants in 2022. Those will be announced this Saturday.
Ooh. And I bet, are they going to be attending? Are they going to be, the winners going to be there?
Some of them will, yeah. Not all of them.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Excited for that.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I like about the recognition, I think going back to one of the earlier comments, was sometimes you can, often the early adopters are also often wanting to share their struggles, so you don't have to. And some of the projects we heard about were some pretty impressive exterior integration, long distance, lots of nodes, both combination of Bluetooth and mixing actually of multiple protocols over far distance and just multiple control points. And it's really great to hear about those examples where it isn't as always easy, especially over, in my opinion, exterior and long distance. So they really wanted to share, oh yeah, this is the struggles we found and here's how you could do it better. So it is really a mutually beneficial, actually.
So the second phase is when you have the early adopters, which are the Gucci suit crowd. They want that status, and great. I mean, that's the thing. I would take it myself. But I think the next phase is the people who hate waste. There's people that aren't interested in getting Gucci suit status or winning awards or anything, but they're building managers, and I know them. I know a lot of them. They just hate waste. They don't want to waste energy. They don't want to waste their HVAC. They don't want to waste gas. They want to do things for to eliminate waste, and they'll look at a 10-year payback. They're financially sophisticated enough to know, and they have some cash, and they say, you know what, this actually is not a bad investment for us. It's better than the bathroom renovation that we were planning. Whatever they budgeted in their things, and you know what it does? It reduces our HVAC waste and reduces our lighting waste, and it combines and gives us this information, and who knows what we're going to do with that. That's the second phase, is when those type of not early adopters, but just people that don't like to waste, that want to run their buildings efficiently as possible, start looking at these kinds of systems that have worked for the Gucci suit crowd. Once we get there, you're going to start to see the ball might tip over the mountain and roll down the hill, like it did with LEDs. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that, but there's one more point I want to bring up here at the end. You want to fill in on that a bit, or go right into the Big Brother point?
I'm all in on Big Brother. Let's go.
Okay, so are we ready for this? And that's my, take out the conspiracy crowd that think everybody wants to know everything about them, because nobody really cares about you that much, actually. But are people going to be a little bit, because I'll tell you this, I've installed a lot of sensors in my career, just stupid passive infrared sensors. And people often wonder if they're cameras. They want to know if they're recording their voice. They want to know these things. They ask these kinds of questions like, what is that thing? That big, remember the old, you get them smaller now, remember the old bulky sensors that go on the ceiling, Greg? Huge, like it looked like a pimple on the ceiling. It wasn't recessed. You couldn't recess it. It was like this big thing on the ceiling. You put it strategically in the corner so it doesn't seal up the door or whatever. And people were concerned that those things were microphones and cameras and this sort of stuff. That's going back 12 years now. 15 years now. I haven't really pushed those sensors that much lately. Do you think there's going to be concerns with privacy, with what are they recording conversations? These are real questions that I think the industry has to overcome, because there's going to be microphones in these things to listen for HVAC and noise. Like some sensors they work on, one of their backup systems is microphonic, right? So it hears, not sees, it hears. Is there going to be concerns on that, Axel? Do you think people are going to be, hey, I don't know if I want that? What do you think? What's been the response so far?
Well, I think you're right. I think it is a concern that will be there. And it kind of reminded me back to your comment about us being the product of other data. And so at this point, maybe we should be used to this, that things are collecting data on us all the time, whether it's our smartphones or our cars that are all very smart. They can, know when we open the door or open a window. And I think that is a valid concern, but I think it comes down to education and letting people know that these things help optimize our building, and this is how you operate in a smart building or a good grid steward that can actually benefit the utility grid, can lower carbon emissions, save money, so more people can have a job at that place. I think beyond that, it just takes, it might take some convincing.
Michael.
It's a fair concern. It's a valid concern, and the industry is looking at it. I've seen some early prototype video-based sensors, and the way they can break down an image into like literal bits, so they can detect the difference between, let's say, a head and a basketball, but they can't actually tell you who the face is really impressive. So there are people out there who are very concerned about it, and they are working so that they can make the sensor smart, but actually not smart enough to actually be a security risk, both from a Big Brother point of view, but other aspects as well, because so there's that. I also think about, at some point, it becomes just a monstrous amount of data that nobody could process if they wanted to. So there are some concerns that at some point you'll just have too much data. There are, as I mentioned, this general service.
Nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever said. I've never heard like Google come out and say we got too much data here. We don't need any more. They all seem to want more and more and more, actually. So
when we start moving into petabytes and zettabytes, at some point someone's going to say, what are we doing with all this data? I agree with you. Google and other organizations like a lot of data, and I understand the value in it. But at some point, I can't imagine a single building storing it. But you're right, it could be uploaded to the cloud and processed at an aggregate level. But buildings are serious about it. As I mentioned, the GSA project, they actually definitely reviewed it with their staff and actually chose not to turn on certain technologies because there was a privacy concern. So I would say when it comes to certain things, If it's using your Bluetooth in your phone, you're probably actually more of a little bit of a privacy concern there. If it's using low bit visual video based data, less of a privacy concern because they've really worked to make those to address these concerns. So some of it might be you having to opt in, and other ones you should definitely opt out of. But I do think the industry is hearing it, and I've seen a few different prototypes of ways they're addressing it.
You know, what's interesting, I'm just going to go completely off topic and then I'm going to come back to something because a thought just occurred to me. I often tell people that wasted electric light is hazardous waste at night. Outdoor wasted electric light at night is hazardous waste. I often say this. I think the data industry, I'm not in that industry, but people have to understand that data waste is also waste because there's a server out there that's supporting this data storage that's using electricity all day long to support useless data, and that's a waste of energy big time. And so there's going to be a push down the road to start getting rid of some of your data that's in the cloud, like the things that people are storing, because there's servers out there storing all this garbage. I bet you if they did an analysis of Google Docs or something like that, they would say 99% of all Google Docs are never accessed. They just sit there in the cloud. And nobody ever goes back and accesses them, but they use whatever 100 megabytes each year or whatever. Anyway, but I think that it's going to be interesting. I think the number one business case, unfortunately, for all of this is unsavory actors. So people that were looking to spy on others, because I upgrade lighting systems all the time. I put sensors in. If I actually wanted to spy on someone, I would just install this system for them as a paid service that they paid me. I'm just thinking like a criminal here, guys. And then embedded this technology and then did that controls integrator thing. And now I'm spying on their entire facility. I think, there's that, and it has nothing. It's just like, it seems like, oh, we're just upgrading our factory to aux sensors and new lights. But then those aux sensors, once this technology, people are going to think, well, if I win the lighting contract for that HP facility and I'm the subcontractor, I'm just going to embed all this technology into the building anyway. And so that's a risk too with this sort of stuff, that this is a great way to spy on people. I hate to say it, for nefarious foreign actors, for industrial espionage and all that sort of stuff. That's an issue that the industry has to address as well, is how to make, because if that starts to happen, nobody will adopt this technology ever. Nobody will do it. And it's almost like we need to nip that in the bud, because if it comes out in the news that, Northrop Grumman was infiltrated by Chinese T8 LED tubes that listened and communicated with a server in China, the information from this defense manufacturer. That's in the cards, okay? People think it's ridiculous, but how do we combat that? How do we make sure that doesn't happen, or how do we minimize those kind of things with this technology? Tough one. Tough one. It's a tough one. So. Yeah,
well, I'm not an operational security expert, so I would think that if you are a secure facility, in your Northrop Grumman example, there are people who are looking for stray wireless signals. I mean, I guess what I'm ultimately thinking about is that, at least when it comes to operational security, physical security plays a role. So at some point, if you are going to be a nefarious person, you have to take that signal out of the building in some way. So I would think the first thing people would be looking for is stray a gateway or something. And again, the gateway itself has to be powered. So this isn't just the easiest scenario you're describing, but there are bad actors out there. So I would think that secure facilities would definitely be looking for stray data signals and things like that. I think they're the run-of-the-mill non-secure facilities, it's less of an issue as well. But I'd like to believe that there are fewer nefarious actors out there than there are.
Well, we don't know. Greg, any final thoughts for Axel and Michael before we go to them?
No, not on my end, guys. Anything?
Is there anything we? Well, you know what I'll do. I'll start with Axel. What are your final thoughts for the people listening to this podcast, and whatever you got? Anything maybe we missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, nothing that we missed. But yeah, I think they're to kind of round out the story, and we hit on it, LEDs were a great energy savings story. But as you mentioned, Michael, that we're kind of now seeing the decline, and now some of those more projects are LED replacements of LEDs. Those first gen LEDs still might make energy sense, but there's still potential for energy savings, right? And it comes with advanced lighting controls, integration with other building systems. pretty far and few between right now, and that's kind of what Michael and I are working on, trying to, again, build that body of knowledge or build those example case studies that prove that this is a viable technology and help those early adopters. And again, like you said, there are some concerns. We talked about a little bit like compatibility. Can these systems actually work together? They're expensive, they're complex. There's these security issues. So I think this is definitely something to keep our eye on. It seems to me like this is where the building industry is headed, and we'll have to solve some of these issues.
Michael.
Well, first, thank you for having us on. It's been a very fun hour. I've enjoyed it. Second, I would echo almost everything Axel said. I think we are seeing smarter buildings, even not advanced buildings, but just many of our components now are becoming more digital, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see LEDs and the lighting industry move forward and embrace more digital technology, and interoperability and intercommunication, and just really I wish we didn't have to hire an integrator because everything was super easy to put together. But I understand from some of the nuances and some of the challenges. But I'd like to hopefully tear down a few of those just to make it a little easier for some of these integrations.
Somebody's got to knock heads together with the manufacturers and say, look, this is the protocol, this is the standard. Because, it's like you're not going to be the Google of lighting. Okay, I'm going to break the news to you. That's not going to happen. There's and the market is potentially enormous. There's no shortage of existing buildings. There's lots of buildings that don't have this, almost all of them, right? Axel said it. It's hard, few and far between, right? So if we could just knock heads together on that, that would, I think, would be fantastic. The one application, and I'm going to throw a challenge back at PNNL because I love your work. But there's something I'd love to see you guys do. I think the number one business case for all of this is with outdoor municipal street lighting, because you don't need 185 different kinds of outdoor street light heads. You know what I'm saying? You could have the equipment standardized, and I think in the municipal side, there's such a great business case for this data. To study different patterns of use in the city, and do lights increase crime? Do they reduce vagrancy? Do they, if we go dark sky mode, does it increase? We could really study things in the outdoor. If it was, if we could capture that. So I want to throw that back to PNNL. I'd love to see that high level PNNL research into that, because I think it's like just the way you guys dive into it, and you have resources and time, and like Greg's got to go sell a retrofit after this. After this, he's leaving to go sell light bulbs. It's the same with me. We got to run our businesses, but you guys have such a wonderful opportunity. I'd love to see more research in that vein. But Greg, before we go, yes, I think we have to send special thanks over to the sponsor, Cooper Lighting. Go to COOPERLIGHTING.com.
That's right. You're looking at highly scalable integrated lighting automation solutions, traditional relay panels, room controllers, smart connected devices, all combined. You can control indoor and outdoor. We talked about that today, Mike, the importance of that, while reducing energy costs, improving comfort, and a lot more. So if you need to get into that, or you should get into that, you check out Cooper Lighting.
And if you made it to the end here, we say double thanks to Cooper Lighting for supporting these kinds of conversations. I think it's so wonderful that you're doing that, and to get the word out to the people that listen to Get a Grip on Lighting, that this is a freight train coming. It may be a little bit in the distance, but it's going to arrive at the station real soon. So start getting education, start training, start thinking about your strategy in this realm, because if it's going to be something that comes. There's no doubt about it. But we've made it to the end. Thank you for listening. Take care.